the mad genius that Rassie Erasmus is, adding Tony Brown to the setup has been a magical stroke. I mean, I think he's elevated South Africa's attack.
Let's look at the legality of both of these things, though, because clearly, World Rugby has got an issue here. They've got to figure this out.
It's always a titanic battle, especially when South Africa go to New Zealand. It's going to be the biggest test. It's still the ultimate test for South Africa to go and win in New Zealand and do that consistently, back to back.
DSPN, the Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
It is always a pleasure to catch up with a good old friend from South Africa, Philasande Sixaba from SuperSport. And we got much to talk about, my friend. Welcome to the new show, the DSPN. Do you like it?
Love it. Looks nice. It's great to catch up with you boys. It's been a while, but really, really excited. Plenty to talk about it.
Look, we got two massive games coming up against your mob later on in the year in September. I mean, that is where the bar is at. And so obviously everything that is going on with South African rugby and your Springboks, we are obsessed as always here in this country. Let us start with the two topics which everyone is talking about, and these are the innovations that we saw against Italy. First the kickoff, and then the lifting actually in-game play, not in a line-out. So what has been the reaction to both of those things back at your place?
I think it's always going to be a positive reaction from South Africans. Rassie and his coaching staff have been known to really push the innovation boundaries, especially in the last year, especially since the likes of Tony Brown have come through, and I think you guys know him pretty well down in Otago country, where he had a lot of innovations with the Highlanders and trying to push the boundaries in terms of what he can and what he can't do in terms of attack and how to set up that. I think the reaction has generally been positive from a lot of people here in South Africa in terms of how exciting these innovations are. I think from minute one, we saw with that kickoff where it didn't go 10 deliberately. So the man was in front of the kicker, and just to generate the scrum, I thought that was genius. And you could see from minute one that the Springboks wanted to really innovate and try and push the boundaries in that game against Italy. So I think that the reaction has been generally positive from a South African point of view.
Okay, let's look at the legality of both of these things, though, because clearly, World Rugby has got an issue here. They've got to figure this out because and there's such things as bending the rules. Look, can I say, we admire it all, but at the same time, kind of question whether or not that it's going to be allowed to continue.
Well, I guess the first one, especially the one, the kickoff, it's very much still within the letter of the law. I think I had to read it up somewhere as well.
As we all did.
Just to understand it a little bit. It's completely within the letter of the law. And I think somebody like Jaco Paper being involved in the setup would have been on hand to advise how and which way they can try and work around it, and then basically you can force a scrum, which from that situation where you can have a man in front of the kicker, and then the sanction there is a scrum and not necessarily a penalty. So I think they're finding ways and loopholes around the laws, I guess, from a South African point of view, and remains to be seen how that's going to continue from a law's perspective when World Rugby catches wind of it, I guess. And the second one is literally something that they saw from an under-14 B
Apparently
side from Paul Roos, a famous South African side, some famous South African school here in the Western Cape in terms of them lifting and creating a set piece from general play. So I think that one might be raising a few eyebrows a little bit more from the suits at World Rugby. But I think for me, it's still very much within the letter of the law, and hopefully it can continue a little bit longer.
Yeah, the confusion around it from this side is just simply how on earth would you defend that? Because you're not allowed to tackle the two guys who are lifting because they don't have the ball. So, and you can't touch the guy in the air. So, yeah, it's something that they're going to have to sit down and figure out. Whether or not these two things get brought into the two tests against us, we don't know. But quite clearly what he's trying to do is he's pushing the envelope, and good on him for doing that. In terms of the way that your team is playing at the moment, we've seen the Barbarians game, we've seen 2 against Italy. How do you assess where South Africa is at? Because all of those games have been won easy.
I think there's been a lot of combinations tested in these first 3 games of the year, especially that Barbarians game where we saw a lot of new faces. The first test match against Italy was a more fuller strength, close to full strength as you can possibly get for South Africa. And then the second test match was also just testing a number of other combinations that could help South African rugby in the near future, maybe 2026 going into 2027. And I think there's one eye on that World Cup in 2027 from a coaching perspective. So there'll always be a few teething problems when you're trying to test combinations and stress test them in a full-on test match. I thought South Africa didn't play to their fullest capacity in terms of what they can do in these 3 games of the year so far. There have been a number of injuries. I mean, Siya Kolisi hasn't played a test match so far this year. There's so many other players that are still yet to come back from injury. A guy like Frans Malherbe is out for a prolonged period of time. But it was good to see some new faces. A guy like Asanati Blabakanye, who's a really strong scrummager from the Lions. A guy like Kobus Visa, who made his test debut this past weekend. Strong, big ball carrier in that second row, plays for the Bulls. So there's been a lot of combinations being tested, and I think South Africa will be in better stead for it later on in the year.
Your backline looks magnificent. I mean, some of the moves, there was one especially, I think it came off a lineout, or it might have been a scrum actually, where there was some wraparound passes and cut through and a little chip kick went in. And we're just absolutely crediting Tony Brown with this, of course, here in New Zealand. We say that he's made all the difference. But seriously, he has, though, hasn't he? He has made all the difference, but you can see, what his imprint is, and also just the thinking, because Tony's a very popular guy here, and we know, we're very sad to lose him. We always thought that him and Jamie Joseph would have been a great combination to coach the All Blacks too. But he just seems to have, unlocked the door, saying confidence and expression to your backline. Is that fair?
Absolutely. I think with the mad genius that Rassie Erasmus is, adding Tony Brown to the setup has been a magical stroke. I mean, I think he's elevated South Africa's attack in terms of its fluidity. There's so many options now in terms of South Africa's attack. You can play Mani Lebok at 10, you can play Sasha Feinberg and Gomezulu at 10, and you get 2 different things, and then you can bring on the reliability and the experience of 100 Pollard to run that back line at 10, and it all depends on who plays and when against what opposition. But certainly Tony Brown has added a lot of ingenuity to the South African side in terms of its attack. I've been a great admirer of his for a very long time, since he's playing days, at the Highlanders, and then he came for a bit of a stint here in South Africa with the Sharks, and then just his coaching journey is just, elevated his profile in terms of his attack. Wherever he's gone, even in Japan, people speak about him as somebody that really wants to find creative ways to attack, and I think that's been brilliant, and South Africa are benefiting hugely from it.
Philasande, as much as we're obsessed about your lot, I know that you've got an eye on us as well. How you looking at the All Blacks, and how do you think that we're actually, how are we improving any from last year? How are we looking after these first 2 French tests?
I think that first one was a little bit of rust trying to get out of the system from an All Blacks point of view. France, to their credit, really fronted up well. Very young and inexperienced France side that has come to New Zealand shores. But I think that rust came out nicely in the second test match. And I think it's it's one of those things where, second season you want to improve, and I think that's what Scott Robinson is doing with the side and trying to test more combinations. A guy like Billy Proctor has been really, really good for a very long time now and consistent at Super Rugby level for the Hurricanes, and getting him in and trying to make sure there's some sort of stability. I've always thought that Rico Ioane was better suited.
A lot of us do, yeah.
On the wing. He is a great finisher. A Will Jordan, very close now to breaking that New Zealand try scoring record. So there's so many deadly players out wide for New Zealand, and for them to really make sure that they put it together is going to be so crucial. I like the fact that there's duality now in terms of the forwards. A guy like Tupovai now playing in the 6 jersey is going to be so huge for them. You get extra height in that line out with a couple of options, and Scott Barrett is still there. It's looking really good, and I think that first test match against France was a bit of nerves and rust coming out of the system, and they really put on a good show this past weekend.
Couple of questions, then we'll let you go, and we thank you so much for your time as always. Look, as I said right at the start, these 2 tests are looming. What we're trying to do at the moment clearly is develop depth. We seem to have, I think, really good front 5 now. We've got good props. We've got a couple of injured. We're building that second row and trying to get some extra height, obviously. But we're looking long distance at what you guys are doing. And has South African rugby, has Springbok rugby ever been in a stronger position than you are now? Yes, you've got back-to-back World Cups, but we just look at the playing strength. France have got it at the moment. It's something along the lines of 30 or 40 players that potentially can be selected. And that's clearly what he's trying to do, isn't it? And that's long-term. That's gearing for the next World Cup and maybe even beyond that. But with everything that's gone on, the breakdown of domestic rugby, the fact that so many of your players are playing overseas, it doesn't seem to affect it, but you've got stronger and stronger. So there's many questions in this, but how have you built that base, and what are your thoughts and impressions about what you're seeing now, just in terms of the relative strength, not just in 15, not in 23, but in what is behind that?
It's hugely exciting. I mean, when you look at it and you track it from the time that Rassie Erasmus came as Springbok head coach somewhere around 2018, the number of players now that can play for South Africa almost at will is so huge.
Impressive,
and I think that's a massive credit to how he's been able to give players opportunities, but also develop the right players. I think that the right profile of players have been coming through the system for South Africa for a number of years now. It makes a huge difference to be able to select players based overseas, and I think that's something that maybe New Zealand at the moment are struggling with in terms of their depth in creating that. But it's also nice to see some guys still committing their futures to New Zealand rugby, which allows New Zealand to be able to create that depth. But certainly from a South African point of view, when you look at it, and some of the guys that are based here in South Africa are also just pushing those guys that are overseas to remind them that, that jersey doesn't belong to them. It doesn't belong to anyone, but, through really strong performances. And I mean, I mentioned some of the guys a little bit earlier on there, and Asanati Tlabakani, who's played really well for the Lions, Kobus Visa, who's based domestically with the Bulls. So many players based here in South Africa are really putting up their hands to be in the mix. And you rightly mentioned, I mean, something about 40 to 50 players now that have been tracked and being earmarked and being given opportunities, whether at test match level and other opportunities like the Barbarians games, to be able to develop and feel the pressure of playing at a higher level. So it's exciting. Couple of youngsters also coming through, so which makes it even more exciting, because when you look at some of the age profiles of the players that are getting opportunities, it's early 20s to mid 20s, which really gives Rassie Erasmus a good base to be able to select players come 2027.
Kobus Visa, that's a name from the past. So I hope he's a relation to the 1995 Kobus Visa, who, of course, was a World Cup winner then. Look, we're so looking forward to these games in September. I mean, this is the World Championship. It's not the World Cup, but it's the unofficial World Championship, us against your lot, isn't it? And we've got home advantage this time. We've got Eden Park to protect as well. It's just going to be titanic.
are massive. I think someone on social media was calling it Operation Eden Park to come there and really try and I've said a few keys. It's going to be exciting. I mean, whenever South Africa and New Zealand meet, it's always a titanic battle, especially when South Africa go to New Zealand. It's going to be the biggest test. It's still the ultimate test for South Africa to go and win in New Zealand and do that consistently back to back is going to be a massive challenge. But I think there's a lot of excitement and confidence within South African shores that this Springbok side, with the personnel that it has, with the amount of depth that it has now, can go to New Zealand and come away with 2 victories. But it's better said than done, easier said than done, but it's still going to be a hugely exciting tour.
We ain't going anywhere, man. We're just waiting for you. We're waiting, okay? Hey, look, great talking to you as always. I love catching up with you. Let's do this again before, obviously, those 2 tests.
Absolute pleasure, Martin. Thanks, mate.
This is the DSPN.